Now, we've just had Nigel explain what is going on in Rome with Rishi Sunak this afternoon. Do you think we're actually going to get anything out of this? Will we ever solve this eternal problem with the Rwanda? Lettice, let's come to you first. What do you make of this?
I completely think it's a cruel gimmick. You know, I think this is all about optics, and there is no way that we'll be getting anything out of this because this bill does nothing to address the real issues of illegal migration that are gripping our country. Currently, Rwanda is saying that they will only be able to take, in the initial phases, around 200 migrants per year. Since 2022, we had 75,000 people cross the channel. So that 200 migrants that they'll be willing to take won't even scrape the surface of the problem that we have here. And if they think it will act as a deterrent, it just won't, because the reality is that their odds are still very much in their favor that they'll be able to stay in this country. But I think it doesn't,
I was going to say, Simon, Lettice does have a point there, doesn't she? I mean, it's been described as a gimmick, but the one thing everybody does know is that it's expensive. It's costing £170,000 per migrant.
She doesn't have any point at all. The reality is she can't know the facts that she's purporting. The truth is that it could well work as a solution. I think it's a smart solution to what's a very difficult problem. And if she's not supporting this, then she's effectively supporting the people smugglers and the drowning of innocent illegal immigrants. That's the reality, because if you don't support this, if you don't try and turn people back not to get on the boats, then you are effectively supporting the people smugglers bringing people to Britain, some of whom drown. And that's a consequence of your other commentators' policy. At least the Rwandan solution stops people, discourages people from crossing the channel, and that's the purpose of it. The business model.
It doesn't do that at all. First of all,
well, you can't know that it doesn't do that.
It's quite a harsh accusation that she supported people drowning in the channel. What would you like to say, Lettice?
Well, first of all, the Rwanda policy doesn't stop people crossing the channel at all. It only deals with the issue once they're already in this country. And we've already spent £290 million on this problem, and not one migrant has gone over to Rwanda.
But how do you know that it won't stop people crossing the channel? How do you know that it will not stop people crossing the channel?
The £290 million could have been spent instead on creating an elite workforce to go and track down these gangs, track down these people, so that they can no longer start putting them into boats. That would have been well.
You're not answering the point. How do you know that it will not discourage people from crossing the channel?
Because the odds are very much in their favour. If only 200 migrants can be taken to Rwanda, and we're seeing over 75,000, 30,000 this year coming in alone.
So you're just guessing. So you guess it. You're building your policy on the basis of guesswork. Why don't we try? Why don't we try this solution? The reality is that you support open borders. That's the truth of it. You're happy for people to come here. That's the truth of the matter, isn't it?
No, the truth of it is that I support the principle that we need to do something about this issue. Very much so. We have too much illegal migration to this country. But this will not work. And not least of all, this bill is never going to get through. It's come up against such resistance only at the second reading, which is where you're only meant to discuss the principles of the bill. It's still got to go through committee stage and then on to the House of Lords.
Your policy is to support. Your policy then is to allow people smugglers to decide who can and who cannot come into Britain. That's what your policy supports. Mine suggests that we introduce the Rwandan policy that discourages people from paying people smugglers so that they don't come to Britain in the first place. It's about discouragement. It's about breaking up the people smugglers' business model. You're in support of keeping it.
It hasn't done that at all to this stage. There is no evidence.
It hasn't done it because it hasn't been implemented yet.
And it's not going to be implemented.
Because people like you are trying to stop it.
Simon, Lettice does have a point, though. I mean, the bill is struggling already. It's going to go to the Lords. They are going to throw it back, continually ask for it to be tweaked. It's going to take a long time to get this bill off the ground. Meanwhile, more people are going to make that crossing on the boats.
You're exactly right, Dawn. This is about the will of the people. The majority of the people think this is a good policy and want illegal immigrants stopping from coming in small boats. It's about the will of the people, and it's about the sovereignty of Parliament, and it's for the Parliament to decide, not judges, left-wing lawyers or social commentators to decide who comes into this country. It's for the Parliament to decide. So ultimately, Rishi Sunak has to get the legislation through and make it work.
Simon, I would say, though, it's a very expensive policy, isn't it? We've already given Rwanda 140 million. We're about to give them 15 million more. In return, we accept Rwandans, as part of the deal. It doesn't seem that it makes a lot of financial sense.
It's not as expensive as your other commentators' open borders policy, where we put everybody in expensive hotels, costing absolutely millions upon millions every day of the year.
To be fair to Lettice, I didn't actually hear her say that, but...
I did not say that at all. And going back to your previous point, you're saying that this is something that they've got to get through Parliament for the will of the people. Well, a YouGov poll from this week, less than 1% of them, of this public, don't actually believe that this policy is going to get through. I mean, Rishi Sunak is even tearing himself apart in his own party that they're not supporting this. It's not supported by the left, it's not supported by the right, and it's not supported by the public.
Lettice, I just would ask you that, I mean, the nightmare that the Conservative Party have with this is going to be... very possibly, Keir Starmer's nightmare, in a few months' time. And we haven't actually heard from the Labour Party what their plans are.
No, we haven't at all. And I think that's simply because they don't need to. The Conservatives are taking up all the space, fighting, tearing themselves apart, going to war over this. Labour doesn't need to even say anything at this point. And frankly, Keir Starmer hasn't, but they don't need to say anything for them to start winning people's votes simply by the fact that people are over the Conservative Party.
Simon, you are a former Labour MP. I mean, never complain, never explain. I mean, is that Keir Starmer's policy on this one? He's never going to say anything until he gets elected, and then who knows what he'll do?
Oh, I think it is. I think it's a very poor policy. I'm very disappointed in Keir Starmer in relation to illegal immigration. The policy that they have is more or less identical to the Conservatives, but without the Rwandan policy. The Conservatives are already trying to strengthen the borders and the policing of the borders, etc. That's all he's proposing. Plus, he's suggesting giving more money in foreign aid to developing countries. I don't support that at all. It does need to be something significant. I think the Rwanda policy is the nearest we've got. I think we heard some interesting solutions in terms of Albania and Italy. I think that's worth exploring. But we have to take some decisive action on these issues. And at the moment, the Rwanda policy is the only one on the table.
Lettice, what do you make of Italy's migrant solution with these processing camps in Albania, which they plan to process 36,000 migrants a year, and they are having as many problems as we are with illegal migration. What do you make of what they've done?
I think, well, first and foremost, again, we're going to have to see if that even gets through, because it has been stopped in the Albanian government at the moment. I think that the idea of processing and speeding up the processing powers that we have is one of the main solutions to this problem. We can't have people waiting for months and months to hear paying £8 million a day to house them in hotels. That is just not a way forward. So if Italy can get this over the line, there's something that can be learned from that. That will be worthwhile, but we've got to see if they can get it over the line first.
And ultimately, I think the next step, if we don't get this through Parliament and it still doesn't work, we will have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. If that's what's stopping us from introducing this policy, then that's what we'll have to do. And that will be the will of the people. You'll test that, and a majority will want to leave.
Lettice, do you think that's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, leaving the whole European Court of Human Rights?
I think we are once again just talking about impossibilities here. The Conservatives are out of time to do these things. The next general election is going to be potentially in summer, maybe in the winter. These are all sort of impossibilities. They have no more time left to push such things through.
So what I mean, what the Italians have done, as you said, Lettice, there are problems with it, but it does seem to make sense. So Simon, why can't we just do something like that? It seems to be legally more accessible than the Rwanda plan.
It looks like an interesting solution. I'm sure Rishi Sunak will be looking at it whilst he's over meeting the Italian Prime Minister. One of the solutions is to turn the boats around, which they've done successfully in Australia. But the difference there is that there's much more sea between where the illegal immigrants are coming from and Australia itself, so you've more space to do that. We're in a very narrow channel, so that's extremely difficult. But these are the solutions that we will have to face. And whilst Lettice is saying there's a general election coming up, there isn't much time left. But once Labour get in power and they fail to tackle this solution, and they surely will, then the public, I think, will jolt to the right and pick a much more right-wing government, as is happening across Europe at the moment. And Labour could well implode whilst in government on this very issue, and then we'll see a jolt to the right. I think it's almost inevitable.
What do you make of that, Lettice?
You say that, but we look back at previous 13 years and not one government has managed, not one Conservative government has managed to handle this situation. You know, we had David Cameron saying you'd get it down to tens of thousands, and we're into the hundreds of thousands at this point. So,
and that's because there are far too many moderate Conservatives in the Conservative Parliamentary Party. And if there were some more enthusiastic about tackling this issue, then they would have been more successful at tackling it. But they haven't been. You're absolutely right.
Now, the conference that Rishi Sunak is at this afternoon, previous guests at the festival have included Donald Trump and the Hungarian leader. So it really is a fair description to call it a right-wing conference meeting. Do you think it will do Rishi Sunak's reputation any good attending this event, Lettice?
I mean, he's the leader of our country. He must attend these sort of international events. I don't think that it will do his reputation any damage to be attending these events. Like you say, we want to be working with these other international leaders on how they're going to handle this situation. So I think it's a good thing that we're trying to learn from our partners.
What about you, Simon? Do you think it's a good thing?
Yeah, I think it is a good thing. I think he's desperate to come up with a solution, isn't he? We all agree that he's running out of time. We're running up towards a general election. He has to show that he's took decisive action on this very issue, going to this conference, meeting these people, coming up with alternative solutions. I think it makes absolute sense.
There was just one final point. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I just wanted to... There was a report, I think it was earlier in the week, from the camps in Calais, where they were interviewing again, I have to say, entirely young men who were determined to get to the UK. Lettice, I mean, you know, you're accused of being racist if you say, yeah, but a lot of them they're financial migrants rather than genuinely seeking asylum. What do you say to that argument? I mean, they were saying that the Rwanda, echoing your sentiments, actually, they were saying that the Rwanda deal wouldn't put them off trying to get to the UK.
Yeah, I think actually the solution to those sort of problems is much like we have agreed with Albania, where you can deport people very quickly who are not meant to be there and who are not asylum seekers and send them back to where they came. That's a plan that I think's worked really well, and I think it would do the government well to set up similar plans with other countries.
But you can't deport them easily because they throw the passports away unless you have a Rwandan solution where you can then return them to a third country because they throw the passports away. That's the solution. You're absolutely right. The majority of them are illegal economic migrants.
Yeah, I mean, that is... Do you agree with that, Lettice? I mean, do you agree that most of them are economic migrants?
Of the people coming over, I do believe that, yeah. I do think that they are. And I think that again, comes down to our ability to process them and to move these things along faster. Because right now we're spending millions housing them in hotels or on the Bibi Stockholm or places that are just not suitable for this long-term housing.
Yeah, I think the one thing we can all agree on is the fact that it's costing us a lot of money, whatever solution we try to find for it.